트럼프 트레이드 여전히 유효한 걸까요? 간밤 증시는 3대 지수가 일제 하락하면서 거래 마감했습니다만은 많은 투자자분들 그리고 아마 시청자분들도 기대를 하고 계실 것 같습니다. 그래도 트럼프 2기 집권이 시작이 되면은 더 많은 정책들이 나올 거고 이에 따라서 또 시장이 크게 움직여주지 않겠느냐 하는 기대감 가지실 것 같습니다. 오늘 이에 대한 이야기를 좀 나눠볼 텐데 저희가 특별한 분을 모시고 또 인터뷰를 진행을 했습니다. SC그룹의 북아시아 지역 CIO 레이몬드 청과 함께 인터뷰를 진행을 했는데요. 먼저 트럼프 시대가 오게 되면은 경제는 어떻게 움직이게 될까요? 먼저 만나보도록 하겠습니다.
Like in terms of Trump's victory, the biggest concern to global investors these days would include his advocacy of protectionist measures, including potential 60% tariff to be imposed on imports from countries, including China. So I think from a global investment standpoint, this could stir a step up in volatility on global equities, in particular non-US equities. Of course, if China would be targeted to get most of this incremental tariffs, this would potentially result in a derating of China equities. Even though fundamentally, we think that a lot of the Chinese corporates are better prepared for a second version of the Trump trade war these days as compared with Trump 1.0 back then in 2018. So our view is while there would be a potential derating as a result of these protectionist measures, in particular impacting China equities the most, we think that earnings fundamentals are still to a large degree reliant on domestic policy stimulus. So in terms of China, we will have to look forward to the upcoming NPC and also the December China Central Economic Work Conference for more clarity in terms of the policy stimulus. As for the U.S. domestic economy, protectionist measures should at least bring about some short-term benefits, in particular to the small mid-cap enterprises, because these companies tend to be less efficient, right? So by imposing tariffs to the larger competitors globally, this would mean that these small medium enterprises would potentially benefit as a result.
네, 지난 9월까지만 하더라도 한국 증시에서는 상반기에는 미국을 보고 하반기에는 중국을 봐야 된다라는 의견이 팽배했습니다. 그런데 막상 대통령 선거가 이렇게 완료가 되니 또 일각에선 다른 이야기가 나오고 있습니다. 앞서서 만나봤던 그런 답변처럼 사실 관세 문제만 본다면은 중국 증시는 D 레이팅을 받아야 된다, D 등급을 받아야 되는데 다만 중국 정부 측에서 새로운 부양책을 내놓게 된다면은 그때 다시 한번 우리는 기대를 해볼 만할 것이다라는 의견을 전해주셨습니다. 일각에서는 이제 10조 위안 이상의 경기 부양책이 나올 수도 있다라는 전망이 나오고 있는데요. 앞으로 중국의 또 이 관세에 대해서 어떻게 대응을 할지를 함께 확인해 보시면 좋을 것 같고요. 이어서 또 그렇다면은 트럼프 수혜 섹터, 진짜 수혜 섹터는 어떤 것들이 있을까요? 이어서 만나보도록 하겠습니다.
Yeah, we have long advocated that if Trump prevails in this election with a Republican sweep, we would likely see some of the traditional sectors, including U.S. banks and also U.S. energy, to largely benefit from any upcoming Trump's policy stance. And the energy stance of the Trump administration would likely have a positive effect on the U.S. Energy sector within U.S. equities, in particular the upstream players, in other words, producers of traditional oil and gas companies. So we think these listed companies would likely benefit given they would be allowed allowed to produce more, and also with a lot of the policies coming from the upcoming Trump administrations to bolster the American economy, we think that the global energy demand would likely step up. As compared with prior market forecast. In other words, with strengthened demand, and we would likely see better oil price momentum as well. So we think that in terms of conventional energy, we would likely see some net positive benefits as a result. But the negative in terms of the energy spectrum from this Trump 2.0 presidency will be on the renewables front, right? Mainly because of his re-emphasis of energy paradigm shifting back to fossil fuels. We think that renewable energies, including the clean energy side of things, such as recycling, solar and wind energy players would likely be threatened in terms of the valuation standpoint. I think one big emphasis of Trump's policy stance would be to potentially extend the individual tax cut and also increase some of the tax cuts for corporates. So this will be potentially a pretty major positive factor for U.S. corporates as a whole, right? When we have individuals benefit from extended tax cuts, their disposable income will increase, right, in terms of potential for consumption. So this will bode well for U.S. corporates' earnings outlook, and of course, continue tax reduction from the corporate standpoint would result in higher taxable income as well. So we think broadly speaking, the Republican red sweep scenario has been considered the most positive for U.S. equities in our view. And if we drill down to specific industries, we think that the industrial sector, aerospace and defense will benefit from his emphasis on shifting a lot of the factories back to the onshore market. And also, as we continue to see tensions between the U.S. with other major economies, including China, we think global defense spending will likely step up, which would also benefit the aerospace and defense sector as well. And the third sector that we also think will benefit from Trump's policies will be the banking sector. We believe that the major banks will benefit from deregulation and also stronger loan growth as a result of the supportive measures coming up from the Trump administration. So therefore, we think that the major banks, including investment banks listed in the U.S., will likely be a major beneficiary.
네, 트럼프 수혜 섹터 함께 만나보고 왔습니다. 여러분들은 어떻게 보셨나요? 뭐 에너지라든지 은행 쪽, 금융 쪽은 워낙 뭐 수혜를 받을 것이다라는 의견이 다양하게 나왔던 업종이기도 합니다. 다만 특징적이었던 것은 만약에 레드 수입이 진짜 현실화된다면은 진짜 그게 주식시장에 긍정적이다라는 부분이었는데요. 원래 그래도 상원과 하원이 어느 정도 나눠져야 되지 않겠느냐라는 이러한 의견도 나왔는데 일각에서는 레드 수입이 된다면은 그만큼 정부의 정책 자금이 더 활발하게 일어날 것이고 그렇게 된다면은 지금 공화당 측에서 밀고 있는 방산이라든지 우주 항공 쪽이 조금 더 이 수혜를 받을 것이다라는 의견 함께 나오기도 했습니다. 앞으로 2기가 출범하고 나서 어떻게 세부적으로 정책을 좀 짜내는지를 확인을 해보실 필요가 있을 것 같습니다. 그리고 여기에 더불어서 금리 정책들도 중요할 것 같은데요. FOMC 11월에서는 25베이시스 포인트의 금리 인하가 단행이 됐습니다. 그렇다면 앞으로의 영향은 어떠할까요? FOMC 영향도 이어서 만나보도록 하겠습니다.
I wouldn't really consider a 25 basis point cut a baby cut per se. I think this is an appropriate stance from the Fed's policy point of view because we've been seeing quite resilient economic prints over the last couple of weeks, right? After all, the Fed is very much data dependent. And as Fed Chair Powell mentioned overnight, he would make his decisions independent of who is going to be the president, right? So we think that given the continued economic strength in the U.S., but we have started to see some initial signs of softness of the job market. It makes sense for the Fed to put the rates in a less restrictive position. So I think my view towards that is that after all, it will be a net positive for investment sentiment because the cost of borrowing is coming down, right? And also it will pose less pressure to the environment in the U.S. as we have been keeping track of the default rates in the property sector and also a lot of the different industry groups. And we feel that specific pockets of the U.S. economy have been negatively affected by the restrictive interest rates, right? So with one example being the commercial real estate. And we are also starting to see higher delinquency rates for consumers' credit card spending as well. So declining interest rates in the U.S. Should help alleviate some of the pressure facing not only these consumers, but also corporates as well.
네, 이번 11월 FOMC에서는 25베이시스 포인트의 금리가 인하가 됐고 시장에서는 아마 내년 연말까지 미국의 전체 금리는 3.25%대까지 내려올 것이다 이렇게 전망을 하고 있습니다. 파월 의장도 마찬가지로 이번 기자회견에서 듀얼 맨데이트, 그러니까 현재 연준의 두 가지 책무인 고용과 물가가 모두 다 잘 잡히고 있다라는 의견을 함께 남기기도 했는데요. 앞으로 금리 인하가 되면은 시장에는 더욱더 긍정적인 영향을 줄 것으로 보여집니다. 지금까지 사인 함께 만나보고 왔습니다.